I went to this Hmong village in Thailand to write about their cultural preservation efforts. The village was small, nestled among lush green hills, and the people were welcoming. But there was this sense of mystery hanging in the air, like there was something more to this place than meets the eye. As I interviewed the villagers, I kept hearing whispers about a hidden shrine deep in the forest, a shrine dedicated to a powerful spirit. They warned me to stay away, said it was cursed, but I couldn't resist the urge to investigate. I mean, a hidden shrine in the heart of the jungle? That's the stuff of legends. So, one evening, fueled by curiosity and perhaps a touch of recklessness, I ventured into the forest alone. The trees loomed overhead, casting eerie shadows in the fading light. I pushed my way through thick foliage, guided only by the faint glimmer of moonlight filtering through the canopy. After what felt like hours of trudging through the undergrowth, I stumbled upon it, a clearing in the forest, bathed in an ethereal glow. At its center stood the shrine, weathered and ancient, yet strangely beautiful. Intricate carvings adorned its walls, depicting scenes from Hmong mythology. Ignoring the warning voices in my head, I approached the shrine, my heart pounding in my chest. I reached out a trembling hand and touched the cold stone surface. That's when things started to get weird. The air around me grew thick with tension, and a chill ran down my spine. Suddenly, I felt like I was being watched, like unseen eyes were boring into my soul. I tried to shake off the feeling, but it only intensified as I stepped closer to the shrine. And then I saw it, a figure standing in the shadows, its features obscured by darkness. A shiver ran down my spine as I realized what it was, the vengeful spirit that the villagers had warned me about. I wanted to run, to scream for help, but my feet were rooted to the spot. The spirit began to move towards me, its movements slow and deliberate. I could feel its anger radiating off it in waves, filling the clearing with a palpable sense of dread. I knew then that I had made a terrible mistake, that I had disturbed something ancient and powerful. Desperate to escape, I turned and fled into the forest, the sound of my own ragged breaths echoing in my ears. Branches clawed at my skin as I ran, drawing blood with each passing moment. I could hear the spirit's footsteps behind me, growing louder and closer with each passing second. I pushed myself to run faster, to put as much distance between myself and the shrine as possible. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling that the spirit was right behind me, its presence looming ever closer. Just when I thought I couldn't run anymore, I burst into the clearing where I had entered the forest. Relief flooded through me as I saw the village in the distance, its lights twinkling invitingly in the darkness. I sprinted towards it, my heart pounding in my chest. As I stumbled into the village, gasping for breath, I could feel the eyes of the villagers upon me. They could sense that something was wrong, that I had encountered something beyond my understanding. But I couldn't find the words to explain what had happened, couldn't bring myself to relive the terror of that night. I left the village the next morning, shaken but alive. But even now, as I sit safe and sound in the comfort of my own home, I can't shake the feeling that the spirit is still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for its next victim. And I pray that it's not me. We bought this old farmhouse in a Hmong community in the United States, thinking it would be our dream home. But things started to get weird as soon as we started renovating. At first, it was just little things, strange noises in the night, objects moving on their own. We brushed it off as the house settling, but deep down, we knew there was something more going on. One day, as we were tearing down a wall in the living room, we uncovered something unexpected, eerie symbols painted on the walls. They were unlike anything we had ever seen before, twisted shapes and strange patterns that seemed to pulse with a sinister energy. We tried to paint over them, but they kept reappearing, as if they were determined to be seen. Curiosity turned to dread as we delved deeper into the history of the house. We discovered that it had once belonged to a Hmong family who had mysteriously disappeared decades ago, leaving behind only whispers of dark rituals and unexplained tragedies. It sent shivers down our spines, but we were determined to uncover the truth. As we continued to renovate, the activity in the house intensified. Doors slammed shut on their own, cold spots lingered in the air, and we started to see shadowy figures out of the corner of our eyes. It was like something was trying to communicate with us, but we didn't know what it wanted. One night, as we lay in bed, we heard footsteps echoing through the empty hallways. My heart raced as I clung to my partner, praying that it was just our imagination. But then we heard it, a voice whispering our names, soft and insistent, like it was calling us from beyond the grave. Terrified, we fled the house and sought refuge with a neighbor, desperate for answers. They told us about the Hmong family that had once lived there, about the rumors of dark magic and curses that had plagued the house for generations. They warned us to leave while we still could, but we were determined to confront whatever malevolent force was haunting our home. Armed with knowledge and a newfound sense of courage, we returned to the farmhouse, ready to face whatever awaited us. But as we stepped through the door, we were greeted by a sight that chilled us to the bone. The symbols on the walls were glowing with an otherworldly light, pulsing with a power that seemed to consume everything around them. We knew then that we were in over our heads, that we were no match for whatever dark force lurked within the walls of the farmhouse. With trembling hands, we gathered our belongings and fled into the night, leaving behind the cursed house and all its secrets. As we drove away, the weight of what we had experienced settled over us like a heavy blanket. We had narrowly escaped with our lives, but we knew that the horrors of that night would haunt us forever. And as we looked back one last time at the farmhouse disappearing in the rearview mirror, we couldn't shake the feeling that we were leaving something behind, something malevolent and hungry, waiting to claim its next victims. I was out in the hills of Laos, doing fieldwork as a geologist. It was just another day, until I stumbled upon this well. It looked ordinary enough at first glance, just a hole in the ground surrounded by rocks. But there was something about it that drew me in, something that whispered of secrets hidden in its depths. As I peered into the darkness of the well, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to it than met the eye. I had heard rumors of a tragic legend surrounding the well, tales of a cursed spirit that haunted its waters. But I didn't believe in such things. I was a man of science, after all. Curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to investigate further. I lowered a flashlight into the well, its beam cutting through the darkness like a knife. What I saw sent a chill down my spine. The walls of the well were covered in strange markings, symbols that seemed to writhe and twist in the dim light. As I studied the markings, a sense of unease washed over me. It was like they were alive, pulsing with a malevolent energy that seemed to seep into my very bones. I tried to shake off the feeling, but it clung to me like a shadow, growing stronger with each passing moment. Suddenly, I heard a voice behind me, soft and melodic, like the whisper of the wind through the trees. I turned, expecting to see another hiker or perhaps a local villager. But there was no one there, only the empty expanse of the hills stretching out before me. Shaken but undeterred, I turned back to the well, determined to unravel its mysteries. But as I reached out to touch the markings on the wall, a cold wind swept through the clearing, extinguishing my flashlight and plunging me into darkness. Panic gripped me as I fumbled in the darkness, searching for my flashlight. But before I could find it, I felt something brush against my leg, something cold and clammy, like the touch of a long-dead hand. I recoiled in horror, scrambling backwards in a desperate attempt to escape. But it was too late. Something had me in its grasp, pulling me inexorably towards the well. I thrashed and struggled, but it was like trying to fight against the tide. I could feel myself being dragged closer and closer to the gaping maw of the well, the darkness swallowing me whole. Just when I thought all hope was lost, I heard a voice calling out to me from the darkness. It was faint at first, like a distant echo, but it grew louder and clearer with each passing moment. It was the voice of a woman, soft and soothing, like a beacon of light in the darkness. With renewed strength, I reached out towards the voice, grasping desperately for something, anything, to hold on to. And then, miraculously, I felt a hand close around mine, pulling me back from the brink. It was a local villager, drawn by the sound of my struggles. Together, we fought against the unseen force that sought to claim me, inch by inch, until finally, with one last desperate push, I broke free from its grasp. Gasping for breath, I collapsed to the ground, my heart pounding in my chest. The villager helped me to my feet, his eyes wide with fear and disbelief. He told me of the tragic legend surrounding the well, of the countless souls that had been claimed by its depths over the years. And as I looked back at the well, now nothing more than a dark hole in the ground, I knew that I had narrowly escaped a fate worse than death. With trembling hands, I thanked the villager for saving my life and stumbled back towards civilization, vowing never to return to those cursed hills again. I was in a remote village in China, studying Hmong traditions as an anthropologist. It was an isolated place, nestled among mist-covered mountains, where ancient customs still held sway over everyday life. One day, while I was interviewing villagers, I met a young girl who claimed to communicate with spirits. At first, I was skeptical. I thought she was just a child with an overactive imagination, spinning tales to pass the time. But as I got to know her better, I began to realize that there was something different about her, something otherworldly. She would speak of things that she couldn't possibly know, of events that had happened long before she was born. And sometimes, when she thought no one was watching, I would catch her whispering to someone or something that wasn't there. I tried to dismiss it as coincidence, but deep down, I knew that there was more to it than that. I had heard stories of spirits and supernatural beings in the Hmong culture, but I had always taken them with a grain of salt. Now, faced with undeniable evidence to the contrary, I couldn't help but question everything I thought I knew. As I delved deeper into the girl's story, I uncovered a tragic tale of loss and longing. She had lost her parents at a young age and had been raised by her grandparents ever since. But it was her connection to the spirit world that set her apart from the other children in the village, a connection that had been passed down through generations of her family. Despite my initial skepticism, I found myself drawn to the girl, fascinated by her ability to bridge the gap between the seen and the unseen. We spent hours together, talking about the spirits she claimed to communicate with and the messages they conveyed to her. But as our bond grew stronger, so too did the sense of unease that lingered in the air. Strange things started happening in the village, unexplained noises in the night, objects moving on their own, shadows that seemed to follow us wherever we went. I tried to ignore it, to chalk it up to superstition and folklore, but deep down, I knew that there was something sinister at work. And when the girl told me that the spirits were warning her of impending danger, I knew that I couldn't ignore it any longer. Together, we began to unravel the mystery of the village, uncovering dark secrets that had been buried for generations. We learned of a vengeful spirit that had been haunting the village for centuries, seeking retribution for a past injustice that had never been atoned for. As we delved deeper into the spirit world, the danger grew more pronounced. We became targets of malevolent forces that sought to silence us, to keep us from uncovering the truth. But we refused to back down, determined to see our investigation through to the end. And then, one fateful night, the spirit made its presence known. It manifested in the form of a swirling vortex of darkness, its icy tendrils reaching out to ensnare us in its grasp. We fought back with all our strength, but it was like trying to hold back the tide. Just when all hope seemed lost, the girl called out to the spirits, pleading for their help. And in that moment, something miraculous happened. The darkness began to recede, dissipating like smoke in the wind. We were saved, but the danger was far from over. With the girl's guidance, we fled the village under cover of darkness, leaving behind the darkness and despair that had plagued us for so long. We, a group of college students, embarked on a hiking trip in the jungles of Thailand. It was supposed to be an adventure, a chance to explore the beauty of nature and bond with friends. But as we delved deeper into the dense foliage, we began to sense that something was off. At first, it was just a feeling, a sense of unease that lingered in the air like a thick fog. But as we pressed on, the feeling grew stronger, until it was like a weight pressing down on our chests. We tried to shake it off, to focus on the beauty of our surroundings, but it was like trying to ignore a nagging voice in the back of our minds. And then, we started to hear it, whispers echoing through the trees, soft and insistent, like the murmur of 1,000 voices. At first, we thought it was just the wind playing tricks on us, but as the whispers grew louder, we realized that there was something more to it than that. We tried to follow the source of the whispers, thinking that perhaps there were other hikers nearby. But no matter how hard we tried, we couldn't seem to pinpoint their origin. It was like they were coming from everywhere and nowhere all at once, surrounding us like a shroud of darkness. As night fell, the whispers grew louder, mingling with the eerie sounds of the jungle. Shadows danced in the flickering firelight, twisting and contorting into grotesque shapes that seemed to leer at us from the darkness. We huddled together for comfort, trying to block out the unsettling sights and sounds that surrounded us. And then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw it, a figure standing just beyond the edge of the campfire, its features obscured by shadow. At first, I thought it was just a trick of the light, but as I stared into the darkness, I realized that it was something more, something not of this world. I tried to warn the others, to tell them what I had seen, but my words caught in my throat. It was like I was paralyzed, unable to move or speak as the figure drew closer, its footsteps silent on the forest floor. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the figure vanished into thin air, leaving us shaken and terrified. We knew then that we had to get out of there, to escape the malevolent energy that seemed to permeate the forest. But as we tried to find our way back to civilization, we realized that the forest itself was working against us. Trails seemed to shift and disappear before our eyes, leaving us in circles and dead ends. It was like the jungle was alive, a sentient being with a will of its own. Panic gripped us as we struggled to find our way out, each step feeling like a descent into madness. The whispers grew louder, their words incomprehensible yet filled with malice. We were being hunted, stalked by unseen forces that lurked in the shadows. But just when all hope seemed lost, we stumbled upon a clearing in the forest, a patch of moonlit ground bathed in an ethereal glow. It was like a beacon of hope in the darkness, a sign that we were not alone. With renewed determination, we pressed on, using the clearing as a guide to lead us out of the forest. And as we emerged from the trees, blinking in the harsh light of dawn, we knew that we had escaped the clutches of the jungle, but at what cost? I was an archaeologist working in Laos, excavating a burial site deep in the jungle. It was a challenging but exciting project, as we hoped to uncover artifacts that would shed light on the ancient civilization that once thrived there. One day, while digging in a particularly promising area, I uncovered a jade amulet buried beneath the soil. The amulet was unlike anything I had ever seen before, intricately carved with mysterious symbols and adorned with precious gemstones. It seemed to radiate a strange energy, pulling me in like a moth to a flame. Despite warnings from the locals about disturbing ancient relics, I couldn't resist the allure of the amulet. I decided to keep the amulet for myself, convinced that it held the key to unlocking the secrets of the past. But as soon as I took it into my possession, strange things started happening. I began to have vivid nightmares, filled with images of ancient rituals and blood sacrifice. I tried to brush them off as the product of an overactive imagination, but they haunted me day and night, leaving me exhausted and afraid. As time went on, the nightmares grew more intense, blending with reality in ways that I couldn't explain. I would hear whispers in the darkness, voices that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere all at once. And whenever I looked into the mirror, I would see a shadowy figure standing behind me, its eyes filled with malice. I knew then that I had made a terrible mistake, that I had unleashed something dark and powerful by taking the amulet. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't bring myself to part with it. It was like I was under its spell, unable to resist its pull no matter how much I wanted to. As the days turned into weeks, my life began to spiral out of control. I became paranoid and irrational, convinced that someone, or something, was watching me at all times. I stopped sleeping, afraid of what I might see in my dreams, and started seeing things that weren't there. Desperate for answers, I sought out the help of a local shaman, hoping that he could rid me of the curse that had taken hold of my life. But when I showed him the amulet, his eyes widened with fear, and he refused to touch it. He warned me that I had angered the spirits by disturbing their resting place, and that only by returning the amulet could I hope to regain my sanity. I knew then what I had to do. With trembling hands, I made my way back to the burial site, the weight of the amulet heavy in my pocket. As I approached the spot where I had found it, I felt a sense of dread wash over me, like I was walking into the jaws of a hungry beast. But I pressed on, determined to make things right. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the amulet, holding it out before me like a peace offering. And then, with a sense of relief that washed over me like a cool breeze, I placed the amulet back where I had found it, burying it beneath the soil once more. As soon as I did, the whispers and nightmares stopped, leaving me with a sense of peace that I hadn't felt in weeks. I knew then that I had made the right choice, that I had escaped the clutches of madness by returning the amulet to its rightful place. I was a tourist visiting a Hmong village in Vietnam, eager to immerse myself in the local culture and traditions. One evening, I stumbled upon a traditional shadow puppetry performance and was immediately captivated by the intricate movements and storytelling. The puppets danced across the screen, their silhouettes casting eerie shadows against the backdrop. It was like they were alive, moving with a fluidity and grace that seemed almost supernatural. I found myself drawn into the world of the performance, unable to tear my eyes away from the mesmerizing display. But as the night wore on, I started to notice something strange. The puppets seemed to be following me, their eyes boring into my soul with an intensity that sent shivers down my spine. I tried to shake off the feeling, to tell myself that it was just my imagination running wild, but deep down, I knew that there was something more to it than that. As I drifted off to sleep that night, the images of the puppets lingered in my mind, twisting and contorting into grotesque shapes that haunted my dreams. I woke up in a cold sweat, my heart pounding in my chest, but when I tried to shake off the nightmares, I found that they clung to me like a shadow. Night after night, the nightmares grew more vivid and terrifying, blending with reality in ways that I couldn't explain. I would see the puppets dancing before me, their movements mocking and sinister, and I would wake up screaming, drenched in sweat and tears. I tried to avoid the shadow puppet performances, convinced that they were somehow to blame for my nightmares. But no matter where I went, I couldn't escape the feeling that the puppets were following me, their presence lurking just beyond the edge of my vision. Desperate for answers, I sought out the village elder, hoping that he could shed some light on the situation. But when I mentioned the nightmares and the shadow puppets, his eyes widened with fear, and he told me to leave the village at once, that I was in grave danger. I tried to protest, to explain that I needed answers, but he was adamant I had to leave before it was too late. Terrified and confused, I packed my bags and fled the village, leaving behind the nightmares and the shadow puppets that had haunted me for so long. But even as I left the village behind, the nightmares continued to plague me, following me like a dark cloud wherever I went. It was like they were a part of me now, woven into the fabric of my being, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't escape their grasp. It wasn't until I returned home that I finally found the answers I was seeking. I stumbled upon an old book about Hmong folklore and traditions, and as I flipped through the pages, my blood ran cold. There, staring back at me from the yellow pages, were the shadow puppets that had haunted my nightmares for so long. According to the book, the puppets were used in ancient rituals to summon spirits and communicate with the dead. They were said to hold a dark power, one that could consume the souls of those who dared to gaze upon them for too long. And as I read on, I realized with a sinking feeling in my gut that I had stumbled upon something far more sinister than I had ever imagined. Terrified and shaken, I knew that I had to do something to break free from the nightmare that had consumed my life. With trembling hands, I gathered up all traces of the shadow puppets and burned them, hoping to rid myself of their malevolent influence once and for all. And as the flames consumed the last remnants of the puppets, I felt a sense of relief wash over me, like a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. The nightmare stopped, and I was finally able to sleep soundly once more, free from the grip of the shadows that had haunted me for so long. But even now, as I look back on that terrifying experience, I can't help but wonder what other dark secrets lie hidden in the shadows, waiting to be uncovered by those brave enough to seek them out. I attended a wedding in a Hmong village in Thailand, filled with excitement and anticipation. The air was alive with music and laughter as we celebrated the union of two people in love. But as the night wore on and the festivities continued, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I noticed a woman standing alone in the shadows, her beauty captivating and otherworldly. She seemed to glow in the moonlight, her eyes sparkling with a strange, ethereal light. I was drawn to her like a moth to a flame, unable to tear my eyes away from her enchanting presence. As I approached her, she smiled at me, her lips curving into a seductive grin. I felt a shiver run down my spine as she spoke, her voice like silk against my skin. She told me her name was Mai, and that she was the bride of the wedding. But as the night wore on, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something off about Mai. She seemed to appear out of nowhere, disappearing into the darkness whenever I tried to get close to her. And whenever I asked the other villagers about her, they would clam up and refuse to speak, as if they were afraid of what I might uncover. Determined to uncover the truth, I followed Mai into the forest one night, hoping to catch her alone and get some answers. But as I ventured deeper into the darkness, I realized that I was not alone. Shadows danced in the moonlight, twisting and contorting into grotesque shapes that seemed to mock me from the darkness. I pressed on, driven by a mixture of fear and curiosity, until I stumbled upon a clearing in the forest. There, standing before me, was Mai, her eyes glowing with a strange, otherworldly light. I tried to speak, to demand answers from her, but she silenced me with a single look, her gaze piercing through me like a dagger. And then, with a voice that seemed to echo through the forest, she told me the truth. She was not human, but a spirit trapped between worlds, doomed to wander the earth for all eternity. She had been betrothed to a mortal man long ago, but when he betrayed her, she had been cursed to wander the earth alone, forever seeking revenge on those who wronged her. I tried to run, to escape the clutches of the vengeful spirit before me, but it was like trying to flee from the wind itself. She pursued me relentlessly, her laughter echoing through the forest like the tolling of a funeral bell. But just when all hope seemed lost, I stumbled upon a sacred shrine hidden deep within the forest, its ancient stones bathed in a soft, golden light. With a desperate prayer on my lips, I stepped inside, hoping that the spirits of the ancestors would protect me from harm. And miraculously, they did. As soon as I crossed the threshold of the shrine, the spirit of Mai vanished into thin air, leaving me shaken but alive. I stumbled out of the forest and back to the village, grateful to be alive but haunted by the memory of the vengeful spirit that had almost claimed my life. I was a musician recording traditional Hmong folk songs in Laos, fascinated by the rich cultural heritage of the region. One day, while sifting through old recordings in search of inspiration, I stumbled upon an ancient melody that seemed to resonate with a strange, otherworldly energy. As I listened to the haunting strains of the melody, I felt a sense of unease wash over me, like I was being drawn into a trance. But despite the creeping sense of dread that filled me, I couldn't tear myself away from the music. It was like I was under its spell, unable to resist its hypnotic allure. Determined to uncover the origins of the melody, I delved deeper into the archives, searching for clues that would shed light on its mysterious origins. But the more I learned, the more I realized that I was in over my head. The melody had a dark history, one that was steeped in ancient rituals and blood sacrifice. Despite the warnings from the locals, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had to learn more about the melody, that it held the key to unlocking secrets that had been buried for centuries. And so, I set out on a journey to trace its origins, hoping that it would lead me to the truth. But as I delved deeper into the melody's dark past, I unleashed a force beyond my control, a malevolent presence that seemed to feed on the fear and despair of those who dared to listen to it. I started to notice strange things happening around me, objects moving on their own, shadows that seemed to follow me wherever I went. I tried to brush off the strange occurrences as coincidences, but deep down, I knew that there was something more to it than that. The melody had awakened something ancient and powerful, something that was determined to claim me as its own. As the days turned into weeks, the malevolent presence grew stronger, its influence spreading like a virus through the village. People started to act strangely, as if they were no longer in control of their own bodies. I knew then that I had to put an end to it, to stop the melody from wreaking havoc on the lives of those around me. With trembling hands, I set out to destroy the recordings of the melody, hoping that it would banish the malevolent presence once and for all. But as I reached for the tapes, I felt a cold chill run down my spine. The melody had other plans for me. Before I could react, the melody surrounded me, wrapping me in its icy embrace. I tried to fight back, to resist its pull, but it was like trying to swim against the tide. I was powerless against its influence, consumed by a darkness that threatened to swallow me whole. But just when all hope seemed lost, I heard a voice calling out to me from the depths of my mind, a voice that sounded like my own, but older and wiser. It told me that I had the power to break free from the melody's grasp, but that I had to believe in myself and trust in my own strength. With renewed determination, I pushed back against the darkness, refusing to let it consume me. And slowly but surely, I felt its hold loosen, until finally, with one final burst of effort, I broke free from its grasp. Gasping for breath, I looked around me, relieved to find that the malevolent presence had vanished without a trace. I knew then that I had narrowly escaped a fate worse than death, and that I had the melody to thank for showing me the strength that lay within me all along. I'm a collector of Hmong artifacts, always on the lookout for unique and rare items to add to my collection. During a trip to Vietnam, I stumbled upon a mysterious vendor selling a set of antique dolls. Intrigued by their intricate craftsmanship and the stories they seemed to tell, I decided to purchase them without hesitation. At first, everything seemed fine. I proudly displayed the dolls in my home, admiring their beauty and the history they represented. But as time went on, strange things started happening around the house. Objects would go missing, only to turn up in bizarre places hours later. I brushed it off as coincidence at first, but deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more sinister at play. Then, the accident started. It began with small things, a vase falling off a shelf, a picture frame shattering for no apparent reason. But as the days went by, the accidents grew more frequent and more dangerous. I started to fear for my safety, wondering if I had unwittingly brought something malevolent into my home. I couldn't help but think back to the vendor in Vietnam and the strange aura that had surrounded him. Had he known about the doll's curse? Or was it just a coincidence? I didn't know, but I knew that I had to do something to protect myself. Desperate for answers, I turned to experts in Hmong folklore and superstition, hoping that they could shed some light on the situation. But when I showed them the dolls, their faces paled, and they refused to touch them. They warned me that the dolls were cursed by the spirits of their creators and that I had unwittingly brought a powerful force into my home. Terrified but determined, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I gathered up the dolls and set out to return them to the vendor in Vietnam, hoping that doing so would break the curse and put an end to the chaos that had engulfed my life. But as I made my way back to Vietnam, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being followed. Shadows seemed to lurk around every corner, and strange whispers echoed through the streets, chilling me to the bone. When I finally reached the vendor's shop, I was greeted by an eerie silence. The air was thick with tension, like a storm was brewing on the horizon. I hesitated for a moment, unsure if I was making the right decision, but then I squared my shoulders and pushed open the door. The vendor was waiting for me inside, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and resignation. Without a word, I handed him the dolls, hoping that he would take them back and rid me of their curse once and for all. But instead of taking the dolls, the vendor shook his head and refused, warning me that the curse was now mine to bear. I felt a chill run down my spine as his words sunk in, realizing that I was now trapped in a nightmare of my own making. With a sinking feeling in my gut, I turned to leave, but before I could reach the door, the dolls came to life, their eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. I watched in horror as they advanced towards me, their movements jerky and unnatural. With a scream on my lips, I stumbled out of the shop and into the street, running as fast as my legs could carry me. I could feel the dolls' presence behind me, their malevolent energy pulsing through the air like a suffocating fog. But just when all hope seemed lost, I stumbled upon a shrine hidden deep within the streets of Vietnam, its ancient stones bathed in a soft, golden light. With a desperate prayer on my lips, I stepped inside, hoping that the spirits of the ancestors would protect me from harm. And miraculously, they did. As soon as I crossed the threshold of the shrine, the doll's presence vanished without a trace, leaving me shaken but alive. I stumbled out of the shrine and back to my hotel, grateful to be alive but haunted by the memory of the cursed dolls that had almost claimed my life. As an antique dealer, I often come across fascinating items with rich histories. One day, I stumbled upon an ornate mirror at a Hmong estate sale in the United States. It was beautiful, adorned with intricate carvings and adorned with gemstones. I couldn't resist purchasing it for my shop, convinced that it would make a stunning addition to my collection. However, as soon as I hung the mirror in my shop, strange things started happening. I would catch glimpses of shadowy figures lurking in its reflection, their eyes gleaming with an otherworldly light. At first, I brushed it off as my imagination playing tricks on me, but as the sightings grew more frequent, I began to fear that something more sinister was at play. The figures seemed to beckon me towards them, whispering in hushed tones that sent shivers down my spine. I tried to ignore them, to focus on my work and pretend that everything was normal, but deep down, I knew that I couldn't escape their gaze. As the days went by, the shadowy figures grew more insistent, their presence becoming almost unbearable. I started to lose sleep, haunted by nightmares of being pulled into the mirror and trapped in a world of darkness and despair. Desperate for answers, I turned to experts in the occult, hoping that they could shed some light on the situation. But when I showed them the mirror, they recoiled in horror, warning me that it was a portal to the other side and that I had unwittingly unleashed dark forces beyond my control. Terrified but determined, I decided to get rid of the mirror before it was too late. With trembling hands, I wrapped it up in a blanket and carried it out to the dumpster behind my shop, praying that doing so would break whatever hold it had over me. But as I turned to leave, I heard a voice calling out to me from the depths of the mirror, a voice that sounded like my own but twisted and distorted. It told me that I couldn't escape, that the mirror was mine now and that I belonged to it. With a cry of fear, I ran back into my shop and slammed the door shut behind me, hoping to block out the voice that seemed to echo through the walls. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that the mirror was still out there, waiting for me. In a last-ditch effort to rid myself of the cursed mirror, I reached out to a local priest, hoping that he could perform an exorcism and banish the dark forces that had taken hold of my shop. But when he arrived, he refused to enter, warning me that the mirror was too dangerous and that I had to get rid of it at once. With a sinking feeling in my gut, I realized that I was on my own. I had to face the mirror head-on and put an end to its reign of terror once and for all. With a deep breath, I gathered up all of my courage and made my way back to the dumpster behind my shop. As I stood before the mirror, I felt a sense of dread wash over me, like I was standing on the precipice of something terrible. But I couldn't back down now. I had to confront the mirror and break its hold over me. With a primal scream, I hurled the mirror into the dumpster and watched as it shattered into a million pieces, its dark energy dissipating into the air like smoke. And as I stood there, panting and shaking with fear, I knew that I had finally freed myself from its curse. As I made my way back into my shop, I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief wash over me. The shadowy figures were gone, their whispers silenced at last. And as I looked around at the familiar surroundings of my shop, I knew that I had finally rid myself of the cursed mirror that had haunted me for so long. My partner and I were wandering through the back alleys of Bangkok when we stumbled upon a hidden market. It was tucked away from the bustling main streets, its entrance obscured by a tangle of vines and shadows. Intrigued by the air of mystery surrounding it, we decided to explore further. As we made our way through the narrow alleyways, we noticed that the vendors were selling Hmong artifacts, beautiful tapestries, intricate carvings, and ancient relics that seemed to whisper secrets from a forgotten past. The market was bustling with activity, but something felt off about the vendors. Their movements were stiff and mechanical, their eyes glazed over with a strange, otherworldly light. Despite the strange atmosphere, we couldn't resist the allure of the artifacts on display. We found ourselves drawn deeper into the market, unable to tear ourselves away from its hypnotic pull. But as we explored its offerings, we began to notice that the items for sale came with a deadly price. The vendors seemed to be offering more than just artifacts. They were selling pieces of their own souls, each item imbued with a dark and sinister energy. We watched in horror as unsuspecting customers bought the artifacts, only to be consumed by a darkness that seemed to seep into their very being. Realizing that we were in over our heads, we tried to leave the market, but the alleyways seemed to shift and twist around us, leading us in circles. Panic began to rise in my chest as I realized that we were trapped, at the mercy of forces beyond our control. With each passing moment, the darkness seemed to grow stronger, enveloping us in its suffocating embrace. I could feel its icy fingers creeping up my spine, threatening to drag me down into the depths of despair. Desperate for a way out, we turned to each other for support, clinging to one another as we fought to escape the clutches of the market. But no matter how hard we tried, it seemed that there was no escape from the darkness that surrounded us. Just when all hope seemed lost, we stumbled upon a small alleyway that seemed to lead out of the market. With a renewed sense of determination, We raced towards it, the darkness nipping at our heels like a pack of hungry wolves. But as we reached the end of the alleyway, we were met with a sight that chilled us to the bone. The vendors, their eyes glowing with an otherworldly light, blocking our path with their lifeless bodies. With nowhere else to turn, we braced ourselves for the worst, prepared to face whatever horrors awaited us in the darkness. But to our surprise, the vendors stepped aside, allowing us to pass through unharmed. With a sense of relief washing over us, we fled the market and made our way back to the safety of the main streets. As we looked back one last time at the hidden market disappearing into the shadows, we knew that we had narrowly escaped a fate worse than death. I was backpacking through Laos, exploring the lush jungles and remote villages that dotted the landscape. One day, while trekking deep into the jungle, I stumbled upon a clearing where a group of Hmong villagers were gathered, their faces painted with intricate designs and their voices raised in song. Intrigued by the scene before me, I decided to stay and watch, hoping to learn more about the ancient traditions of the Hmong people. But as I observed the ritual, I realized that it was unlike anything I had ever seen before. The villagers moved with a fluidity and grace that seemed almost otherworldly, their movements synchronized with the rhythms of the jungle. As I watched in awe, I realized that I had an opportunity to document the ritual and share it with the world. Pulling out my camera, I started to snap pictures, capturing every detail of the ceremony as it unfolded before me. But as I focused on getting the perfect shot, I failed to notice the warning signs, the darkening sky, the rustling of leaves, the sense of unease that hung in the air like a heavy fog. By the time I realized that something was wrong, it was too late. With a sudden crash of thunder, the skies opened up, unleashing a torrential downpour that sent the villagers scattering for cover. I tried to follow suit, but before I could reach shelter, I stumbled and fell, landing hard on the ground. As I struggled to regain my footing, I heard a low, guttural growl emanating from the darkness. My blood ran cold as I realized that I was not alone. Ancient spirits, angered by my intrusion, had come to seek revenge. With a sense of mounting terror, I scrambled to my feet and ran as fast as I could, the spirits hot on my heels. Branches clawed at my skin, roots snaked out from the forest floor, tripping me up at every turn. But no matter how hard I tried to escape, it seemed that the spirits were always one step ahead of me, their eerie whispers echoing through the jungle like a death knell. I knew then that I was in grave danger, that if I didn't find a way to appease the spirits, they would consume me whole. With no other options left, I turned to the villagers for help, hoping that they would intervene and put an end to the spirits' rampage. But when I reached the village, I found it deserted, the streets empty and silent as the grave. Desperate and alone, I knew that I had to find a way to appease the spirits before it was too late. With trembling hands, I rummaged through my backpack, searching for anything that might help me communicate with them. And then, like a bolt from the blue, I remembered the camera, the one I had used to document the ritual in the jungle. With a sense of hope rising in my chest, I turned it on and started to play back the footage, hoping that it would somehow appease the spirits' wrath. To my surprise, the spirits seemed to respond to the images on the screen, their angry growls growing softer as they watched the ritual unfold before them. With a sense of relief washing over me, I realized that I had found a way to communicate with them, to show them that I meant no harm. As I continued to play back the footage, the spirits gradually grew calmer, their anger giving way to curiosity and eventually acceptance. And then, with a final, echoing roar, they vanished into the darkness, leaving me shaken but alive. With the threat of the spirits finally lifted, I made my way out of the jungle and back to civilization, grateful to be alive but haunted by the memory of the terrifying encounter that had unfolded in the depths of the forest. And as I looked back one last time at the jungle disappearing in the distance, I knew that I would never forget the harrowing experience that had changed my life forever. I was conducting research as a marine biologist, studying coral reefs off the coast of Vietnam. One day, while diving in the depths of the ocean, I stumbled upon an abandoned shipwreck. Intrigued by its mysterious presence, I decided to investigate further. As I swam closer to the wreck, I noticed that it bore signs of having been underwater for many years. Barnacles clung to its rusted hull, and seaweed swayed gently in the currents that surrounded it. But despite its dilapidated appearance, there was something about the shipwreck that drew me in, like a moth to a flame. Descending deeper into the murky depths, I entered the dark interior of the wreck, my heart pounding with excitement and trepidation. The air was thick with the scent of decay, and my footsteps echoed off the walls as I moved cautiously through the corridors. As I explored the wreck, I noticed that there were remnants of Hmong artifacts scattered throughout, ancient carvings, delicate tapestries, and other objects that hinted at a connection to the local community. Intrigued by this discovery, I continued to press on, determined to uncover the secrets that lay hidden within the depths of the wreck. But as I delved deeper into the ship, I began to feel a sense of unease creeping over me. The shadows seemed to grow darker, the air colder, as if some unseen presence was watching me from the shadows. Ignoring the warning signs, I pressed on, my curiosity getting the better of me. But as I reached the heart of the wreck, I stumbled upon something that sent a chill down my spine, a hidden chamber filled with strange symbols and arcane markings. Intrigued and terrified in equal measure, I approached the chamber, my heart pounding with a mixture of fear and excitement. But as I stepped inside, I felt a sudden wave of dizziness wash over me, like I was being pulled into a whirlpool of darkness. And then, with a sudden burst of energy, the symbols on the walls began to glow, their eerie light illuminating the chamber in an otherworldly glow. I watched in horror as the symbols seemed to come to life, twisting and writhing on the walls like snakes. With a sinking feeling in my gut, I realized that I had unleashed something ancient and powerful, a curse that had been trapped within the wreck for centuries. And now, it was hungry for revenge. As the curse closed in around me, I scrambled to find a way out, my heart pounding with fear. But no matter which way I turned, the walls seemed to close in around me, trapping me in their suffocating embrace. With no other options left, I closed my eyes and prayed for a miracle, hoping against hope that someone, anyone, would come to my rescue. And then, just when all hope seemed lost, I heard a voice calling out to me from the depths of the wreck, a voice that sounded like my own, but twisted and distorted by the curse. With a surge of adrenaline, I forced myself to open my eyes and face the darkness head-on. And to my amazement, I saw a glimmer of light shining through a crack in the hull of the wreck, a way out, a lifeline in the darkness. With renewed determination, I swam towards the light, pushing myself to the brink of exhaustion as I fought against the curse that threatened to drag me down into the depths of despair. And then, with one final burst of energy, I broke free from the wreck and surfaced, gasping for breath as the cool sea air washed over me. As I floated on the surface of the ocean, I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief wash over me. I had escaped the curse of the shipwreck, but I knew that the experience would haunt me for the rest of my days. And as I looked back one last time at the wreck disappearing into the depths, I knew that I would never forget the terror that had unfolded within its dark corridors. But for now, I was safe, and that was all that mattered. I'm a treasure hunter, always on the lookout for valuable artifacts hidden in the mountains of Thailand. One day, while exploring a remote area, I stumbled upon a legendary white elephant statue. It was said to be cursed, but I didn't believe in such superstitions. Ignoring the warnings of locals, I decided to take the statue for myself, convinced that its rumored curse was nothing more than a myth. But as soon as I laid hands on the statue, I felt a chill run down my spine, like a cold hand gripping my heart. Brushing out the feeling of unease, I packed up the statue and made my way back to civilization, eager to sell it for a hefty profit. But as soon as I brought it into my home, strange things started happening. I would wake up in the middle of the night to the sound of whispers echoing through the darkness, and I would see shadowy figures lurking in the corners of my room. At first, I tried to dismiss it as my imagination, but as the sightings grew more frequent, I began to fear for my sanity. Desperate for answers, I turned to experts in the occult, hoping that they could help me rid myself of the curse that seemed to be consuming my life. But when I showed them the statue, they recoiled in horror, warning me that I had brought a powerful force into my home, one that would stop at nothing to exact its revenge. Terrified but determined, I decided to get rid of the statue before it was too late. With trembling hands, I listed it for sale online, hoping that someone else would be foolish enough to take it off my hands. To my surprise, the statue sold almost immediately, and I breathed a sigh of relief, convinced that I had finally rid myself of the curse that had been haunting me for so long. But as I watched the statue being loaded into the buyer's car, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just passed the curse onto someone else. As the days passed, I tried to put the experience behind me, but I couldn't shake the feeling of guilt that weighed heavy on my heart. I knew that I had made a terrible mistake, one that would haunt me for the rest of my days. And then, one day, I received a call from the buyer of the statue. His voice was frantic, his words barely coherent as he told me of the horrors that had befallen him since bringing the statue into his home. He begged me to take it back, to rid him of the curse that now consumed his life. With a heavy heart, I agreed to take the statue back, knowing that I was the one responsible for unleashing its vengeful spirit upon the world. And as I watched the buyer drive away, I couldn't help but wonder how many more lives would be ruined by the curse of the white elephant statue. I'm a photographer, always seeking out remote and off-the-beaten-path locations to capture on film. One day, while exploring the remote regions of China, I stumbled upon an ancient sacrificial altar hidden deep in the mountains. It was a chilling sight, surrounded by crumbling stone pillars and overgrown with vines and moss. As I set up my camera to capture the eerie scene, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that settled over me like a dark cloud. The air seemed to hum with an otherworldly energy, and I felt as though I was being watched by unseen eyes. Ignoring the sense of foreboding that gnawed at my insides, I focused on getting the perfect shot, determined to capture the haunting beauty of the ancient altar. But as I snapped the final picture, I felt a sudden chill run down my spine, like a cold hand gripping my heart. With a sinking feeling in my gut, I realized that I had unwittingly become marked for sacrifice by the restless spirits that haunted the altar. Panic surged through me as I realized the danger I was in, but it was too late to turn back now. As I tried to make my way back to civilization, I felt as though I was being pursued by unseen forces, their whispers echoing through the trees like a sinister melody. Every shadow seemed to conceal a lurking threat, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being hunted. With each passing moment, the sense of dread grew stronger, until it felt as though I was suffocating under its weight. I knew that I had to find a way to escape the clutches of the spirits before it was too late. Desperate and alone, I pushed myself to the limit, my heart pounding with fear as I raced through the wilderness, trying to put as much distance between myself and the altar as possible. But no matter how fast I ran, it seemed that the spirits were always one step ahead of me, their whispers growing louder with each passing moment. Just when I thought that I couldn't go on any longer, I stumbled upon a small village nestled in the mountains. With a surge of relief, I made my way towards it, hoping that I would find safety and sanctuary within its walls. But as I approached the village, I realized that something was terribly wrong. The air was thick with an oppressive silence, and there was not a soul to be seen anywhere. It was as though the village had been abandoned in a hurry, its inhabitants fleeing some unseen danger. With a sinking feeling in my gut, I realized that I was not alone. The spirits that had haunted the altar were still on my trail, their vengeful wrath hot on my heels. With no other options left, I ducked into the nearest building and barricaded the door behind me, praying that it would hold against the onslaught to come. For hours, I huddled in the darkness, listening to the whispers of the spirits as they circled outside, their anger growing with each passing moment. I knew that I was running out of time, that I couldn't hold out much longer against their relentless assault. But just when all hope seemed lost, a faint glimmer of light appeared on the horizon, the first rays of dawn breaking through the darkness. With a final, desperate surge of energy, I pushed open the door and fled into the safety of the daylight, leaving the spirits behind me in the shadows. As I made my way back to civilization, I couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude wash over me. I had escaped the clutches of the spirits, but I knew that the memory of that terrifying encounter would stay with me for the rest of my days. My friends and I decided to go camping in a Hmong forest in Laos, seeking adventure and a break from the hustle and bustle of daily life. The forest seemed peaceful and inviting as we set up our tents and prepared for a night under the stars. But as darkness fell and the sounds of the forest grew louder, we began to feel a sense of unease creeping over us. Strange whispers seemed to echo through the trees, their voices barely audible but unmistakably sinister. At first, we tried to brush off the whispers as nothing more than the wind rustling through the leaves. But as the night wore on, the whispers grew louder and more insistent, their words becoming clearer with each passing moment. Terrified but determined to stay calm, we huddled together in our tents, hoping that the whispers would fade away with the light of dawn. But as the night dragged on, we realized that we were not alone in the forest. Shadowy figures began to appear among the trees, their forms shifting and twisting in the darkness like wraiths. We watched in horror as they moved closer, their eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. With mounting terror, we realized that the forest itself was alive with malevolent energy, its very essence twisted by forces beyond our comprehension. Desperate to escape, we packed up our belongings and prepared to flee into the safety of the open road. But as we made our way through the forest, we realized that the path ahead was blocked by a wall of thick undergrowth. Panic surged through us as we realized that we were trapped, at the mercy of whatever dark forces lurked within the forest. With no other options left, we turned back and tried to find another way out, but it seemed that the forest had other plans for us. Every path we took led us deeper into its twisted depths, until we were hopelessly lost among the trees. As the whispers grew louder and the shadows closed in around us, we knew that we were running out of time. With each passing moment, the forest seemed to tighten its grip, its malevolent energy sapping our strength and will to escape. But just when all hope seemed lost, we stumbled upon a clearing in the forest, bathed in the soft glow of the moonlight. With a surge of relief, we raced towards it, hoping that it would lead us to safety. And then, as if by magic, the whispers faded away, and the shadows retreated into the darkness. We knew that we had been spared by some unseen force, but we dared not linger in the clearing for fear of what might still lurk within the forest. I'm passionate about textiles, especially the intricate weaving techniques of the Hmong people in Vietnam. During one of my research trips, I stumbled upon an ancient loom tucked away in a remote village. The locals warned me to stay away from it, but I couldn't resist the temptation to uncover its secrets. As I delved deeper into the history of the loom, I learned that it had a dark and troubled past. Legend had it that it was cursed, bringing misfortune to all who dared to tamper with it. But I dismissed the warnings as mere superstition, convinced that I could handle whatever challenges lay ahead. With each passing day, I became more obsessed with the loom, spending hours poring over old manuscripts and studying its intricate design. But the more I learned, the more I realized that there was something sinister lurking beneath the surface. Strange things started happening around me. Objects would go missing, strange shadows would flicker in the corners of my vision, and I would wake up in the middle of the night with a sense of dread gnawing in my insides. But I brushed off these occurrences as mere coincidences, unwilling to admit that I might have unleashed something beyond my control. As I continued to unravel the mysteries of the loom, I found myself drawn into a web of deceit and betrayal. The villagers seemed to grow more distant and secretive, and I couldn't shake the feeling that they were hiding something from me. But try as I might, I couldn't uncover the truth behind the loom's dark history. It was as though the answers were always just out of reach, taunting me with their elusiveness. And then, one night, as I sat alone in my room, poring over ancient manuscripts by the dim light of a flickering candle, I heard a strange sound coming from the direction of the loom. It was a low, guttural growl, like the sound of an animal in pain. With a sense of mounting dread, I crept towards the loom, my heart pounding in my chest. And then, as I reached out to touch it, I felt a sudden surge of energy coursing through my body, like 1,000 needles piercing my skin. With a cry of pain, I stumbled backwards, falling to the ground in a heap. And as I lay there, gasping for breath, I realized that I had made a terrible mistake, one that would cost me dearly. With each passing moment, the darkness seemed to grow stronger, enveloping me in its suffocating embrace. I could feel its icy fingers closing in around me, threatening to drag me down into the depths of despair. But just when all hope seemed lost, a glimmer of light appeared on my horizon, the first rays of dawn breaking through the darkness. With a final burst of energy, I forced myself to my feet and stumbled towards the door, desperate to escape the clutches of the loom before it was too late. And then, with one final, desperate leap, I broke free from the darkness and emerged into the safety of the daylight, gasping for breath as the cool air washed over me. As I looked back one last time at the loom disappearing into the distance, I knew that I had narrowly escaped a sinister fate. I'm a traveler, always seeking out new adventures and experiences. One day, while hiking through the mountains of China, I stumbled upon a remote village inhabited by the Hmong people. As I explored the village, I came across a mysterious shaman who seemed to possess a deep knowledge of the supernatural. Intrigued by his presence, I struck up a conversation with the shaman, who offered to guide me on a spiritual journey through the mountains. Eager to learn more about the local culture and traditions, I accepted his offer, unaware of the dangers that lay ahead. As we set out on our journey, the shaman led me deeper and deeper into the heart of the mountains, his movements graceful and fluid as he moved through the rugged terrain. But as we ventured further from the safety of the village, I began to feel a sense of unease creeping over me. Strange things started happening around us. Shadows seemed to flicker in the corners of my vision, and I could hear whispers echoing through the trees. But the shaman reassured me that these were merely signs of the spirit world reaching out to us, and I tried to push aside my growing sense of dread. But as the hours passed and we delved deeper into the realm of the supernatural, I realized that I had made a terrible mistake. The air grew thick with an otherworldly energy, and I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. With a sinking feeling in my gut, I realized that the shaman had led me into a trap, and that I was now at the mercy of forces beyond my control. Panic surged through me as I realized the danger I was in, but it was too late to turn back now. Desperate to escape the clutches of the supernatural, I tried to run, but the forest seemed to twist and turn around me, leading me deeper into its dark heart. With each step I took, I could feel the presence of malevolent spirits closing in around me, their icy fingers reaching out to drag me down into the abyss. But just when all hope seemed lost, I stumbled upon a small clearing in the forest, a shaft of moonlight piercing through the darkness like a beacon of hope. With a surge of adrenaline, I forced myself to keep running, pushing through the pain and exhaustion as I made my way towards the light. I'm a fashion model, and I've always loved the excitement of photo shoots and runway shows. One day, while on a gig in Thailand, I was chosen to wear a traditional Hmong headdress for a photo shoot. It was an honor, and I was excited to see how the headdress would look on me. As the stylist placed the headdress on my head, I felt a strange sensation wash over me, like a cold breeze blowing through my mind. At first, I brushed it off as nerves, but as the shoot progressed, I began to feel more and more unsettled. Strange thoughts began to fill my head, thoughts that weren't my own. I felt like I was being pulled into another world, a world filled with darkness and despair. But no matter how hard I tried to shake off the feeling, it clung to me like a shadow, growing stronger with each passing moment. As the shoot came to an end, I couldn't wait to get the headdress off my head and return to normalcy. But as I reached up to remove it, I felt a sudden surge of energy coursing through my body, like a bolt of lightning striking me from above. With a cry of pain, I stumbled backwards, falling to the ground in a heap. And as I lay there, gasping for breath, I realized that something was terribly wrong. I was no longer in control of my own body. With each passing moment, the darkness seemed to grow stronger, enveloping me in its suffocating embrace. I could feel the vengeful spirit of the headdress's previous owner taking hold of me, its rage and despair consuming me from within. Desperate to break free from its grasp, I tried to fight back, but it was no use. The spirit was too powerful, too filled with hatred and anger to be overcome. And as I felt myself being dragged deeper into its dark embrace, I knew that I was running out of time. Finally, I managed to break free. I am forever haunted by that experience. I work as a librarian in the United States, surrounded by books and ancient artifacts every day. One day, a rare Hmong scroll with mysterious symbols written in blood catches my eye. Intrigued by its strange allure, I decide to take it home and study it further. As I begin to translate the contents of the scroll, a sense of unease washes over me. The symbols seem to shift and writhe on the page, as if they are alive with some dark energy. Ignoring my growing apprehension, I press on with my translation, determined to unlock the secrets of the ancient text. But as I delve deeper into its meaning, I unwittingly unleash a malevolent force that threatens to consume my soul. Strange things begin to happen around me. Objects move of their own accord, strange shadows flicker in the corners of my vision, and a sense of dread hangs heavy in the air. I try to rationalize the strange occurrences, telling myself that it's just my imagination running wild. But deep down, I know that something is terribly wrong. As the days pass, the malevolent force grows stronger, its presence becoming more and more oppressive. I feel like I'm being watched, like unseen eyes are following my every move. I try to seek help, but no one believes me when I tell them about the sinister force that has taken hold of my life. They dismiss it as nonsense, telling me that I'm just stressed out or overworked. Desperate for answers, I return to the Hmong scroll, hoping to find a way to banish the malevolent force once and for all. But as I study its cryptic symbols, I realize with a sinking feeling that I've only made things worse. The malevolent force feeds off my fear and despair, growing stronger with each passing day. I feel like I'm losing control, like I'm being consumed from the inside out. In a last-ditch effort to save myself, I flee from my home, hoping to escape the clutches of the malevolent force that haunts me. But no matter where I go, it follows, its sinister presence lurking just beyond the edge of my consciousness. I find myself running through the streets, my heart pounding in my chest as I try to outrun the darkness that pursues me. But no matter how fast I run, I can't seem to shake it off. Just when I feel like I can't go on any longer, I stumble upon an old abandoned church, its crumbling walls offering a glimmer of hope in the darkness. With nowhere else to turn, I duck inside, praying for sanctuary from the malevolent force that hunts me. As I collapse onto the cold stone floor, I feel a sense of peace wash over me. For the first time in days, the darkness recedes, leaving me with a sense of clarity and purpose. With renewed determination, I vow to fight back against the malevolent force that has tormented me for so long. I may be alone, but I refuse to let it consume me. Armed with nothing but my courage and determination, I confront the darkness head-on, ready to do whatever it takes to banish it from my life once and for all. And as I stand in the shadows of the old abandoned church, facing down the malevolent force that threatens to consume my soul, I realize that I am stronger than I ever knew possible. With a defiant cry, I banish the darkness from my life, emerging victorious and free at last. As a historian fascinated by Hmong culture, I found myself in China, researching ancient temples tucked away in remote corners of the country. One day, I stumbled upon rumors of a hidden temple dedicated to a powerful spirit, hidden deep in the mountains. Ignoring the warnings of locals who spoke of curses and dark magic, I set out to find the temple, driven by my insatiable curiosity. After days of trekking through dense forests and rugged terrain, I finally stumbled upon the hidden entrance to the temple. As I entered the temple, a sense of awe washed over me. The air was heavy with the scent of incense, and the walls were adorned with intricate carvings depicting ancient rituals and ceremonies. I explored the temple with eager anticipation, marveling at the beauty of its architecture and the richness of its history. But as I delved deeper into its depths, a sense of unease began to gnaw at me. I came across a chamber filled with ancient relics and artifacts, each one more mysterious than the last. Among them, I found a sacred altar adorned with offerings of food and incense. Ignoring the warnings etched into the stone walls, I reached out and touched one of the relics, a small figurine carved in the likeness of the temple's guardian spirit. As soon as my fingers brushed against its surface, I felt a surge of energy course through me, filling me with a sense of power and purpose. But as quickly as the feeling had come, it vanished, leaving me feeling drained and disoriented. I stumbled backwards, my head swimming with dizziness as I struggled to regain my composure. And then, without warning, the temple began to shake violently, as if it were being torn apart by some unseen force. I clung to the walls for support, my heart pounding in my chest as I realized that I had disturbed something sacred, something that was not meant to be disturbed. I tried to flee the temple, but the entrance had been sealed shut, trapping me inside with whatever dark force I had unleashed. Panic set in as I realized that I was completely at its mercy, with no way to escape. I heard strange whispers echoing through the temple, voices speaking in a language I could not understand. Shadows danced on the walls, twisting and writhing in unnatural shapes. I stumbled through the darkness, my footsteps echoing in the empty halls as I searched desperately for a way out. But every turn seemed to lead me further into the depths of the temple, deeper into the clutches of the curse that had been unleashed. Just when I felt like all hope was lost, I stumbled upon a hidden passage leading to the outside. With a surge of adrenaline, I raced towards the opening, desperate to escape the darkness that threatened to consume me. As I burst out into the sunlight, I collapsed onto the ground, gasping for breath and shaking with fear. But I knew that my ordeal was far from over. The curse still lingered, waiting to claim me as its next victim. With no other options left, I vowed to find a way to lift the curse and free myself from its grasp. Armed with nothing but my determination and my knowledge of history, I set out on a quest to uncover the secrets of the temple and banish the darkness once and for all. I traveled to a remote Hmong village, eager to learn about their rich culture and traditions. The village was nestled deep in the mountains, far from the modern world, and it felt like stepping back in time. As I wandered through the narrow streets, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The villagers stared at me with suspicion, their eyes filled with a mixture of curiosity and mistrust. I tried to strike up conversations with them, eager to learn about their way of life, but they remained tight-lipped and evasive. It was as if they were hiding something from me, something they didn't want me to know. Undeterred, I pressed on with my exploration, determined to uncover the secrets of the village. But the more I asked questions, the more the villagers seemed to withdraw into themselves, as if they were afraid of what I might discover. One day, as I was exploring the outskirts of the village, I stumbled upon a hidden path leading into the dense forest beyond. Intrigued, I followed it deeper into the wilderness, my curiosity getting the better of me. As I walked, the air grew thick with tension, the atmosphere heavy with the weight of ancient secrets. I felt a sense of unease creeping over me, like I was trespassing on sacred ground. But I pressed on, driven by a desire to uncover the truth. And then, suddenly, I stumbled upon it, a hidden clearing deep in the heart of the forest, surrounded by towering trees and overgrown foliage. At the center of the clearing stood a dilapidated shrine, its ancient stones weathered and worn with age. As I approached, I felt a chill run down my spine, as if something was watching me from the shadows. I hesitated, unsure of what to do. But then, curiosity got the better of me, and I stepped forward, drawn towards the shrine like a moth to a flame. As I entered the clearing, a sense of dread washed over me, like I was stepping into a trap. I tried to shake off the feeling, telling myself it was just my imagination running wild. But then I heard it, a low, guttural growl emanating from the darkness beyond the shrine. My blood ran cold as I realized that I was now alone in the clearing. I turned to flee, but it was too late. Something grabbed me from behind, its grip like iron around my throat. I struggled against it, but it was no use. I was powerless against whatever force had ensnared me. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. I thrashed and kicked, desperate to break free from its grasp. But the more I struggled, the tighter its hold became. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the force released me, sending me sprawling to the ground. I lay there, gasping for breath, my heart pounding in my chest as I struggled to make sense of what had just happened. I staggered to my feet, determined to get as far away from the clearing as possible. But as I turned to leave, I caught a glimpse of something lurking in the shadows, a pair of glowing eyes, watching me with a hunger that sent shivers down my spine. I fled from the clearing, running blindly through the forest, my mind reeling with fear and confusion. I didn't stop until I reached the safety of the village, where I collapsed in exhaustion, my body trembling with adrenaline. As I lay there, trying to catch my breath, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed me back from the forest, something dark and malevolent that would stop at nothing to claim me as its own. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't escape the chilling encounter I had experienced in the Hmong village, a terrifying reminder of the ancient forces that lurked in the shadows, waiting to ensnare the unwary. The villagers welcomed me with open arms, eager to share their traditions and customs with an outsider like myself. They showed me around the village, pointing out landmarks and explaining the significance of each one. As night fell, I settled into my accommodations, a simple hut on the outskirts of the village. The air was thick with the sounds of the forest, the rustling of leaves and the chirping of crickets filling the night with a symphony of sound. I drifted off to sleep, feeling content and at peace in the quiet solitude of the village. But as the night wore on, I was awoken by a strange sensation, a chill running down my spine, as if someone was watching me from the shadows. I sat up in bed, my heart pounding in my chest as I scanned the room for any sign of movement. But there was nothing, just the darkness pressing in around me, suffocating and oppressive. I tried to shake off my unease and go back to sleep, telling myself that it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. But deep down, I knew that something was terribly wrong. And then, suddenly, I saw her, a figure standing in the corner of the room, her form ethereal and insubstantial, like smoke in the darkness. I froze in terror, unable to move or speak as I watched her approach. She moved with a slow, deliberate grace, her eyes fixed on mine with a haunting intensity. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. I was paralyzed with fear, unable to tear my eyes away from the ghostly apparition that hovered before me. She reached out a hand towards me, her fingers brushing against my skin with a cold, clammy touch. I recoiled in horror, feeling a surge of panic rising in my chest as I realized that I was in the presence of something otherworldly and malevolent. And then, just as suddenly as she had appeared, the ghostly figure vanished into thin air, leaving me alone in the darkness once more. I lay there in shock, my mind reeling with fear and confusion. Had I really just seen a ghost? Or was it just a trick of the light, a figment of my overactive imagination? But deep down, I knew the truth. I had come face to face with something beyond my comprehension, something that defied explanation or rationalization. I spent the rest of the night huddled under my blankets, too afraid to close my eyes for fear of what might lurk in the darkness. And when morning finally came, I fled from the village, eager to leave behind the horrors I had witnessed and never look back. I'm a jewelry designer based in Laos, and I've always been fascinated by the beauty and allure of gemstones. One day, while browsing through a local market, I stumbled upon a set of stunning gemstones that seemed to shimmer with an otherworldly light. Ignoring the warnings of the vendor, who spoke of their cursed nature, I decided to incorporate the gemstones into my latest collection, convinced that their beauty would captivate my customers. But little did I know the dark power that lurked within them. As I worked on my designs, strange things started happening around me. Objects would go missing, strange shadows would flicker in the corners of my vision, and I would wake up in the middle of the night with a sense of dread gnawing at my insides. But I brushed off these occurrences as mere coincidences, unwilling to admit that there might be something more sinister at play. After all, my designs were gaining popularity, and I couldn't afford to let superstition get in the way of my success. But as my creations gained more attention, tragedies seemed to follow in their wake. Customers would complain of strange illnesses and accidents, and rumors began to spread about the cursed gemstones that lay at the heart of my designs. Desperate to salvage my reputation, I tried to distance myself from the gemstones, but it was too late. The damage had already been done. People began to avoid me, convinced that I was somehow to blame for the misfortune that had befallen them. As the whispers grew louder and the accusations more pointed, I knew that I had to find a way to rid myself of the cursed gemstones once and for all. But no matter how hard I tried, it seemed that they were always one step ahead of me, their dark influence spreading like a cancer through my life. With each passing day, the sense of dread grew stronger, until it felt as though I was suffocating under its weight. I knew that I had to find a way to break free from the curse that had taken hold of my life, but I didn't know where to begin. And then, one night, as I lay awake in bed, tormented by visions of the cursed gemstones and the tragedies they had wrought, I heard a voice calling out to me from the darkness. It was a low, guttural whisper, like the sound of a snake slithering through the grass. With a sense of mounting terror, I followed the voice, my heart pounding in my chest as I crept towards the source of the sound. And then, as I reached out to touch the cursed gemstones, I felt a sudden surge of energy coursing through my body, like 1,000 needles piercing my skin. With a cry of pain, I stumbled backwards, falling to the ground in a heap. And as I lay there, gasping for breath, I realized that I had made a terrible mistake, one that would cost me dearly. With each passing moment, the darkness seemed to grow stronger, enveloping me in its suffocating embrace. I could feel its icy fingers closing in around me, threatening to drag me down into the depths of despair. But just when all hope seemed lost, a glimmer of light appeared on the horizon, the first rays of dawn breaking through the darkness. With a final burst of energy, I forced myself to my feet and stumbled towards the door, desperate to escape the clutches of the cursed gemstones before it was too late.